Welcome back to another official Native Assassin update video with your host, yours truly, Hussein Hill. Great to be back with you guys once again in a very, very overdue update video. I do apologize for that. It's been, according to the Rumble channel, it's been at least 5 months, so I do apologize for the hiatus, but I've been very, very busy. But I want this particular update video to be relatively lengthy. We'll see how it goes, but I want to discuss. We're going to merge, usually in these update videos, we do a logistical preamble and then the actual content of the space. I want to kind of fuse those together in discussing my personal plans moving in from 2025 into 2026, as well as sort of the broader sociopolitical state of things as we move from 2025 into 2026. With that said, guys, before we get started, please make sure to go into the description below of the video and follow me in the description below, specifically on, this video will be, we'll see what happens. This video will be launched on both Rumble and YouTube. That's right, Rumble and YouTube. I'm going to go back on YouTube. So follow me on both those platforms. Also follow me on Telegram. I've been very lax on Telegram, but I'm trying to subtly get back into the rhythm of that. And also make sure to donate if you like the content, which is also not only on the video content, but also on the X / Twitter spaces that I hold every single week, usually Wednesday and Fridays, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, rather. If you like the content, please feel donate in the description below at either buymeacoffee / Hussein Hill or at the Cash App directly, NAH at 86. So that's all out of the way. So again, I hope you guys had a great 5 months. You guys had a great New Year and a great Christmas and a great Thanksgiving and general holiday season. I absolutely did. So for me specifically, I just laid out just now, I will be looking to double down and move forward in re-platform myself on places like YouTube specifically. Also double down on releasing video content. Hopefully after this update video, hopefully, no promises here, but hopefully this will relaunch me back into official Native Assassin, official Native Assassin episodes. So look forward for that. But I also want to, moving into the new year, I want to reflect on 2025 specifically, but also things that led us up from when I first started doing videos way back when in 2017 till now. And, you know, it's been a wild ride, as I say. It's been a very interesting ride for me and many other content creators, many other folks within the nominal cultural right wing, doing content, doing activism, doing all these sorts of things. And, you know, there have been years, and I would say 2025 was one of those years, but it was kind of a nuanced sort of phenomenon here in terms of like the mood. There have been years moving forward, I think that all of us have felt, where when we push forward these conversations, we push forward on sort of even just a broader conversation of right versus left, right-wing culture war stuff, you know, the MAGA movement. As you all may or may not know, I have relinquished myself from the alliances of MAGA that happened specifically during the 2024 election. I'm still nominally right-wing, but I am no longer a Trump supporter or a MAGA loyalist because of the fact that I believe that MAGA and Trump in particular have divorced themselves from a commitment to true, transcendent, nonpartisan America First ethos and politic. But regardless of where you stand on all this kind of stuff, whether it be the canceling, the persecution, the blacklisting, the demonetization, all of us have definitely felt this weight on us. And for many years, many of us thought that this was a futile endeavor. We thought that we would be blacklisted forever. Some of us who lost jobs or job opportunities, many of us who lost family, former friendships, etc. We thought that we were just basically setting ourselves up for social suicide and that we would just be blacklisted forever, never to return to public life, never be ingratiated by the mainstream whatsoever. All of that specifically changed after October 7th. That completely changed. The dialectics changed, the political trajectory changed, the conversation changed, and what we saw specifically was that there was a new appetite within the ether, within the public imagination for specifically dubious and or skeptical attitudes being expressed towards Israel, dubious and skeptical attitudes being expressed towards Zionism, and then even, we'll say, latently, directly after October 7th, more explicitly now, against Judaism and Jewry. And now it seems to be the case that people of all stripes, left wing, right wing, and center, are coming out in droves to express a discontent for world Jewry, a discontent for the current arrangement that America and the West has with relation to the state of Israel, and how that relates to the conversation of Judaism, and how that relates to Jews versus the West, or vice versa. Simultaneously, another growing sentiment that's risen with this is the conversation of race identity, particularly this idea of advocacy for white identitarianism. Some might call it white nationalism. Some might call it pro-white advocacy, etc. This conversation that race is not just sort of an abstract concept, or it's not sort of a skin-deep denotation of people groups, but rather race is a real, essential characteristic of people groups, and that more specifically, what defines the West at its core is a white European identity, and that white European identity is crucial, it is essential, it is beneficial, and should be preserved in the pursuit for the advocacy and the propping up and the we'll say the continued perseverance of Western civilization, and of course in particular American preservation and perseverance. So to see all these things become mainstream has been personally a very, very humbling experience. I never thought it would happen. I never thought that people like myself and others who have expressed these views in one way or another throughout the years would ever become quote unquote mainstream. And I am looking to, again, relaunch myself back on YouTube. This video, I'm trying to be the first inaugural video back on YouTube. And I will be, I'm trying to be careful with my language, because it seems to be the case that this conversation has been spearheaded in particular with the rise of Nicholas J. Fuentes. And it seems that YouTube has a very particular way of dealing with Nick Fuentes and his cult of personality and his movement. He's not allowed to be on YouTube, which tells me that this video may or may not stay on YouTube. But people seem to be able to review his videos, seem to be able to espouse his views, and maintain and grow, rather, their following on that platform. The same thing can be said about X and many other social media outlets. There seems to be a palpable understanding within the mainstream consciousness that so-called far-right, revanchist, American nationalist ethos are becoming mainstream. They are becoming viable. They are viable. And in the wake of that, like I said, it definitely, there is a level of it for someone like myself that brings me a lot of joy. Quick sort of like political lore for myself. For those of you who know me, you guys know my lore, but those of you who are new, maybe see me on YouTube for the first time, it's fine. Got involved in politics in 2017, was something of a far-right civic nationalist, something in between that vein. Was a part of groups like the Proud Boys, like the American Guard. Haven't lost respect for those organizations, still keep in contact with a lot of the key players, but moved on to a more solo, politically campaign-minded sort of ideation of politics and operations. And as I progressed with that political project, my views have become more pronouncedly, more explicitly so-called far-right. And again, for those of you who are familiar with my lore, and those of you who are new, these are views that I held prior to me becoming a public figure in politics on any metric. So I've had interactions with far-right so-called politics for years, dating back to at least 2011, 2012, 13. And again, so there's an immense amount of joy that I derive, and I'm sure other people derive as well, that we're becoming mainstream, that this shit is fucking going off. Like, we can actually have these conversations. They're viable. People in the IRL, political and non-political, are having these conversations. With all of that in consideration, and that said, there's also a new host of potential hindrances and obstacles to contend with this new sort of landscape taking hold in the public square, as it were. The most obvious one, and this can be spoken to, this can be most explicitly demonstrated by the Charlie Kirk assassination. And I don't really want to go into the whole conversation about Israel did it versus the lone left-wing pro-trans shooter. I don't want to get into the conversation. I happen to believe that it was the shooter in question, but that's a whole different conversation for another time. But I might actually address that contention in a broader sense later on in this video. But that event definitely recatalyzed the hardline left versus hardline right dichotomy in this country. And I can speak to this anecdotally to a large degree with speaking to people in the IRL, in real life about this, some of which who are center-left. The center-leftists that I know that are reasonable, they haven't abandoned their leftism or their liberal ideology, but they have become more open to discussing conversations with someone like myself. However, there's an equally pronounced sort of swell on the left, you might call the radical left, where now the true believers of the left want to destroy us. You saw this again, Charlie Kirk assassination. You saw this with the response to things like the Jubilee video with Pine Sap and people like Doomer Nat and many other up-and-coming, Doomer Nat more of a newer face, but younger commentators in the conversation, where there is a cultural left wing that wants to destroy and deracinate white identity, deracinate right-leaning, far right-leaning critiques of Israel. So that's very real, and I have dealt with that personally. There's been a resurgence of that here locally. Again, for those of you who know me for a long time, know that I've dealt with Antifa ops and all these sorts of things for years. It's now becoming in vogue to do that to me and many others locally and nationally. So that's actually happening. So that's one of the very obvious sort of hindrances that we have to face going into 2026, 7, 8, and onward, is that the left, the cultural left, is rejuvenated. They are reorganizing, and many of them would like to see people like me and others dead. And for that matter, they would like to see anyone on the right dead, whether you are a neoconservative, whether you're a national conservative type, or you're a Ben Shapiro, whatever stripe or flavor of right-wing politic you are, they want to see us destroyed. And that obviously plays into the conversation of elections and electoral predictions going forward. Another equally pernicious and concerning trend that's happening is this, and it goes right in line with the sort of like nuanced observation that I mentioned earlier in this video about how YouTube in particular is platforming a lot of discussions that echo Nick Fuentes in particular, whether it be him actually on shows, uncensored, released to the public, whether it be reactionary videos, or whether it be just random new faces in the ether echoing these conversations, which is there seems to be a new attempt in the public by particular political operatives, most notably people like J.D. Vance, people like Peter Thiel, people like the National Conservative Coalition, Acosta Amaru, Bronze Age Pervert, that whole scene, to co-opt this rise to prominence of the far right, this rise to prominence of American nationalism. There seems to be this sort of attempt by many within the Republican Party to acknowledge the fact that, yes, this is a new era. Neoconservatism is dead. Neoliberalism is dead. The so-called woke left, for the exception of its true-believing crusaderist radicals, they're rapidly losing favor in the public square. But the new scene, the new in vogue, is America First nationalism. The new in vogue is Christian nationalism. The new in vogue is explicitly or tacitly signaling or advocating for white identity and Israeli skeptical dialectics. This is the new conversation. And so it seems that the new op by the right wing, by the establishment right wing, is to co-opt that. And you see that with people like Tucker Carlson, for example. All the names, as mentioned before, in consideration, but, people in the content creational or creative sphere. Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, many others, right? These people that are trying to, many of which 2 or 3 years ago, 5 years ago, etc., within a very short order, before October 7th specifically, were saying very watered down, boilerplate, conservative, neoliberal sort of talking points. But now, in this modern zeitgeist, they are now speaking like us. They are speaking like the insurgents. They are speaking like the revanchists. So this is another sort of hindrance to be aware of. And one thing I want to touch upon on this update video specifically, and this goes into the line about like what I would like to do going forward in the new year and onward, is I want to escape some of the hamstringing of these reductive dialogues. Because, for example, now it's cool to be racist, so-called. It is in vogue to use racist, dog-whistling, low IQ, red meat for the masses if you're on the right wing, so as long as you can somehow redirect that back into Zionism, right? It's even cool in many ways to prop up Luddites. You see as in many platforms, very reductive hyper-racialists like Handsome Truth and Paul Miller and Blood Tribe and all these sort of hyper-nationalist, politically non-viable actors, almost as sort of ready-to-go straw men for the broader liberal consensus that America still very much exists under. And even when it comes to conversation about Israel and about Jews, there's a few things happening there. It seems to be okay to sort of to prop up these conspiratorialists or conspiracy theorists, these people that you know, in the vein people like Candace Owens, Ian Carroll, I forgot to mention his name earlier, people who will throw out unfounded, bizarre accusations towards people while trying to track that back to it was Israel, in so much as Israel, in their kind of like lexicon, Israel's behind literally everything. And it almost also acts as another sort of like convenient straw man or convenient target for the powers that be to be like, hey, look, this to the extent that the Israel conversation is happening, you have basically two types. And one time I just mentioned this just a few minutes ago. You have this hyper-conspiratorial, schizophrenic, directionless, what's the word I'm looking for? Shallow scene of almost QAnon-esque anti-Israel or anti-JQers, right? People who talk about the Jewish question. But then simultaneously with someone like Tucker Carlson, who's more reasonable, he's offering, and I'd say Dave Smith. I think Dave Smith is a decent actor for what it's worth, but he's kind of doing the same thing as well too. Rational counters to Israel, which is to say that we can criticize the Israeli government, we can criticize Zionism as a political concept, we can criticize the philosophy of Israel, but how dare we, don't you ever veer off into connecting the critiques of Israel to the intergenerational ethno-religious collective of Jews and world Jewry. And so all these ops seem to be happening at the same time. So what I would like to do going forward in 2026, and of course I'm not going to stop talking about these issues, and again I'm on YouTube, so maybe I might save some more spicy episodes for Rumble exclusives, but I'd like to address these issues continuously going forward, but also transcend the hamstringing that has been placed upon people like me to engage in partisan tribalism. I don't want to speak going forward explicitly or specifically in partisan terms, left versus right, white versus black, Jews versus whatever. I want to have a conversation about race. I want to have a conversation about Jews. I want to have a conversation about the philosophical right wing and the philosophical left wing, but in the context of a transcendent, nonpartisan dialectic that serves to bring solidarity and harmony to this country. I want to start investigating, and as many of you guys know who've been following me for a while, I'm very much into music, and I would like to engage in IRL music promotion and online music promotion as well. You know, every few weekends, I've been kind of lax on this. I post music, whatever. I want to even use art and music and the conversation of culture to explore the condition of man in this 21st century, in this modern century. I want to explore what's happening to us as human beings, because, and I've rarely said this on videos recently, but it must be said in this video. The primary reason why I got involved in commentary and politics really went beyond. It went far beyond. It goes far beyond right wing versus left wing, communism versus nationalism, etc. It's really a sense of that I see that human beings are to the extent that they are created beings, they are exceptional beings. They have the capability of we'll say awesome, and I mean that in the descriptive sense, awesome and great expressions of violence and destruction and avarice and hate. But they also create empires. They create art. They create beauty. We are a significant being. Let's not forget. For those of us, and I hope people who are watching are Christian. I'm Catholic. For those of us who are religious, we were favored above the angels upon creation. We were favored above God's most favored creations, which were the choir of angels. And so there's a level to which I want to investigate what's happening to the degradation of human beings specifically. And I have surmised specifically and personally that the apex, the peak of human expression and excellence has for generations, for thousands of years, resided in the Western world, has resided within the broad poly of European and or white civilization. Not to say that whites and Europeans are somehow intrinsically superior to non-whites and Europeans at all. I'm not making that claim whatsoever. But for many uncanny reasons, much of which I'd like to investigate in the years going forward, that is where mankind seems to be the most developed and the most excellent. And I'd like to see that excellence in a imperial way be spread to the world. This is one reason why I abandoned, specifically after the breakout of the Ukraine war, this isolationist, hyper-nativistic view, and I've embraced imperialism. I've embraced this America First, Catholic-driven or Christian-driven imperialism. I want to reclaim I would like our society, America in particular, to reclaim the status as being the good, the driving good in the world. And so that's what I would like to see happen in 2026 with my own content, and that's the message I want to focus on going forward. And going back to what I said earlier about it's been a bumpy ride for all of us. My 2025 it started off benign, it entered pretty great, but then it was bumpy. It was bumpy with dealing with IRL politics stuff. It was bumpy with watching the continuous ops and the continuous campaigns against people like myself, personally and nationally and online. And I know that will continue. So I think that the message I want to leave you guys off with this particular update video is, when moving into the new year, it's time for us to attempt to transcend our message, to transcend our content, to do better, to become greater as political operatives, as thinkers, as creatives, etc. Because I think that right now the stage is set for us to fundamentally redirect our nation and redirect Western civilization, and dare I say by proxy, redirect the global community, human beings in general, to a higher level of thinking and political consciousness. So that's what I'd like to do. Those are my plans for the new year. And with that said, guys, thanks so much for watching this update video. Have a happy new year. God bless you all. And I'll talk to you guys later.